Welcome, everyone, to our Classrooms Over Courtrooms Disrupting the School to Prison Pipeline. To start us off, please welcome Jay Echeverria. Jay.
Hi, my name is Jay Echeverria. I am of Ernak descent, Irish heritage. I am a newer member to the No New Penobscot County Jail expansion team. I am a feminist abolitionist who grew up with three of my brothers incarcerated, raised by a stepfather who spent over 25 years incarcerated. Um, and I am going to tell you a little bit about myself. I was 2 years old the first time I visited my brother in a juvenile detention facility. From that day on, incarceration became the foundation of my relationship with my brother. He was 13 years old when the police kidnapped him and held him hostage for a crime he did not commit. For the vast majority of my childhood, he remained behind bars. I remember more of him from letters and drawings made from broken pens than from in-person experiences in my childhood. In high school, I wrote him every Sunday. He wrote me apologies for being locked up. As an adult, I am appalled that other adults chose to incarcerate my brother's childhood. My first conscious memory of my brother is my father slamming his head into the stones around our fireplace. My brother deserved guidance, mentorship, therapy, and care. Instead, he was traumatized and tortured by guards and police in ways that I am still too shocked to share publicly. To this day, my brother reels from the violence of being raised in a child prison. To this day, he continues to be the target of police violence. Most recently, he was tased until he was unconscious. My family is exhausted from chronically battling the incarceration system as it continuously steals and abuses our loved ones. At 9 years old, my imagination was filled with fears of a future behind bars where guards would drug and sexually assault me because I knew the reality of those experiences. I knew lower class kids don't have to make mistakes to spend the rest of their lives in a pressure cooker of state inflicted violence. Children deserve to grow up with their siblings. The people who raise us deserve to be present with us instead of wasted in memories of police brutality, our homes filled with prison paranoias because our guardians want to protect us from the future they fear we will face behind bars. We children from justice impacted families deserve to imagine the futures we want instead of the futures we fear. I encourage folks to seek inspiration from abolition feminists like Angela Y. Davis, Mariama Kaba, and Shira Hassan, and from Indigenous peoples worldwide rooted in restorative justice healing practices like the Sisika, Wapapa Maori, and Dene. Let's remind people who they are instead of defining them by their worst mistake. Let's end incarceration because oppressed people deserve healing and because systems of European colonial monarchies have no place in our children's futures. Our children deserve gardens, not jail cells. Our Black, Indigenous, and oppressed children deserve rivers and forests and imagination. For Sel, for Saoirse, for life, for freedom. Thank you. I will now hand the mic to Frank to
Uh,
explain his work.
well, one,
Or Sarah.
I'm going to interrupt in the middle. Thank you so much, Jay, for sharing that story of yourself and your brother and your family, and getting us started off. Welcome. My name is Sarah Johnson. I'll be moderating tonight, which really means I need to keep things moving. So here we go. In 1995, Nelson Mandela launched the Children's Fund with a speech in Pretoria. He opened by saying, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." With that in mind, we need to warn everyone here that some of the information and personal stories shared tonight may contain disturbing details regarding mistreatment of youth. We apologize in advance for any distress experienced by anyone. And on that note, for those of you who don't know and those who do, a person died in the Penobscot County Jail on Saturday over the weekend. We have very little information. We are asking everyone just for a moment now that we all sit together for a moment of silence and thought for them and their loved ones. Thank you. Thank you all. And now we're going to begin with Frank Zaro of Society Impact. And he is actually here to share the good news of the possibilities of diversion programs, what they are, why they benefit everyone, especially our youth. Frank, all yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jay. And thank you to No Penobscot Jail Expansion for bringing us together again. No Penobscot County Jail Expansion, I believe, is one of the strongest decarceration coalitions in Maine. It has been an organization that's existed for about 7+ years, and it has achieved a consistent goal of opposing new jail construction and finding other ways to deal with these issues. As we discussed in our last community classroom, the United States has built an enormous criminal legal system. Nearly 2 million people are incarcerated at any given time, and our incarceration rate remains among the highest in the world. This did not happen by accident. It grew from policy choices that made arrest, prosecution, and confinement our responses to problems that often begin with poverty, trauma, disability, addiction, or lack of treatment. There are also institutions and private interests that benefit economically from maintaining this system. And this makes meaningful reform and system disruption very difficult. We believe in diversion, case diversion. And case diversion means intervening without pulling someone further into the core criminal legal system. Depending on the circumstances, a person can be connected to treatment, family support, education, restorative justice, or other community-based programs instead of being arrested, prosecuted, and incarcerated. And this is especially true for our children. We believe in early diversion because it's more meaningful. The earlier, the more meaningful. And we remove cases, our programs remove cases from the criminal legal system from inception. So there is no scar from the system that continues. Reentry services are important after someone has been incarcerated. But diversion asks why we allowed that incarceration to happen in the first place. Early diversion can prevent a court record, separation from family, interruption of education, and the stigma that follows a young person after a long case ends. This is especially important for children. The school to prison pipeline can begin when trauma or disability is treated as dangerous behavior. Discipline is not imposed equally. In Lewiston, for example, Black students were nearly 3 times likely as white students to receive an in-school suspension, while students with disabilities were more than 3 times likely to be suspended outside of school. Wealthier families may be able to obtain private treatment or advocacy. Poorer children are exposed to punishment and police involvement. In 2024, Maine's Division of Juvenile Services received 2,073 juvenile referrals, including 984 involving young people referred for the first time. Long Creek recorded 201 detention admissions and 18 new commitments that year. Those first contacts are opportunities to divert children before the system becomes a lasting part of their lives. Maine's juvenile justice system reaches children as young as 11, while young people may remain under commitment until age 21. Maine adjudicates juvenile cases in the adult court system. They adjudicate children as juveniles, but in the same courthouse that adults are tried. That's traumatizing. To the extent that an 11-year-old child can be confined to the same institution as a 21-year-old adult is improper and it's dangerous. They have profoundly different development needs and levels of vulnerability. Confinement should never become the state's substitute for age-appropriate care. Youth incarceration is associated with worse educational, employment, physical health, and mental health outcomes. It can increase rather than resolve the conditions that lead to later system involvement. We should not groom children for adult incarceration by teaching them to expect surveillance, exclusion, and punishment. Early diversion is better for all of us because it prevents harm before we must try to repair it. It keeps children in school and connected to their families. It costs less than confinement, leaves room for real accountability without placing a permanent mark on the child. Children should receive support before a crisis becomes a charge. Our goal should be not merely to be better reentry for youth incarceration. It should be by making youth incarceration unnecessary. And as I always point to, paraphrase Bishop Tutu, Desmond Tutu, we spend too much time at the base of the river pulling bodies out, and not enough time at the top of the river figuring out why people are falling in. And so you'll hear more about how our diversion system works at the end of this program. But thank you very much for being here tonight. And let's do better for our children.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for the background and thank you for the optimism. And now please welcome Norman Hightower. Norman's going to share his personal story of system impact. Norman.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, No Penobscot County Jail Expansion, for holding this classroom. My name is Norman Hightower, and I currently work with Restorative Justice Project Maine as their reentry programs coordinator. My experience with the system started really young. I think I was arrested maybe at 9 years old for theft, and became known to Bangor Police Department throughout the next few years for a series of run-ins, which included incidents in school, the classroom to prison pipeline really impacted me. I had some mental health diagnoses as a youth, but in short, I ended up incarcerated at what was then the Maine Youth Center, what's known as Long Creek now, when I was 12 years old. And as was stated before, I was there with kids much older than me, even adults, people over 18 years old. It was there was horrific treatment there by staff and other residents. That I won't get into too much of the detail with, but this experience kind of just prepped me. It groomed me for adult incarceration, for a lifetime of that. When I was 12 years old, I spent my 13th birthday there in the youth center. I was there my first time ever incarcerated for about 3 months, a little over 3 months. And that experience definitely shaped me for it basically institutionalized me. I ended up incarcerated over and over again between then and when I turned 18, a period of 5 times. And I was fortunate enough not to ever be committed to the youth center or what was the Northern Maine Juvenile Detention Facility. They don't hold juveniles there any longer, but and for that first time that I went was for basically what they call a technical violation. You know, I was out past curfew, and 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 my mother was willing to take me back home, but I think the probation officer I had, the Bangor Police Department, they wanted to teach me a lesson, and I think that was a life lesson I learned. Yeah, it was certainly. The experience there, the emphasis was not on schooling or anything. I ended up meeting people who I ended up just kind of following that lifestyle. Um, I believe this impacted my mental health greatly. I think it ended up having a great impact on my substance abuse, and ultimately, I ended up in prison multiple times as an adult too. Um, Coming out of the youth center, I don't. There was no emphasis on reentry, and going back to school was really hard because I was removed from that community, and nowadays I know that there are lots of diversion programs. I work with Restorative Justice Project Maine, and we do youth diversion, try to keep kids from going to the youth center to begin with. And I think if the emphasis is on, you know, uh, early, early diversion, like not even having kids stand in a courtroom, uh, I think we're much less likely to have kids removed from the community. Much less likely have it affect them as adults. Much less likely to have this cycle continue. And I know that they talked about this being a less expensive alternative. These diversion programs are less expensive than putting kids in the youth center. And I think cost is sometimes something that politicians, legislators, lawmakers look at a lot. But I think like the human cost really is something that's um, so much more impactful. It took me a long time to get past some of the things that I saw at the youth center, and I'm still not completely past it. Like these things are lifelong scars that I'll live with. I think as was said, no 12-year-old, 11-year-old child is is ready for or should be taken away from. And what I had was I guess it wasn't um it was a non-loving home, it was a functioning home. There were issues there, but it wasn't I was definitely safer at home than I was in the main youth center, what is now Long Creek. And I know that nowadays the diversion programs have been really helpful, and a lot of the things have changed there, and it's not completely the same, but I think we run into a lot of the same problems. And if we're thinking that we can incarcerate kids at 11, 12 years old, and even sometimes older, I think we're just going to find that we're incarcerating them the rest of their lives. Part of my experience also is that a lot of those
Sorry
people
to
that have
interrupt, Norman. I just want to let you know you have about a minute left.
okay, a lot of my experience also is that a lot of people that I was incarcerated with as a youth, I ended up incarcerated with as an adult. It seems like almost the same 50 to 100 people that I met there. If they haven't died of whatever causes, they're still incarcerated. And it turns into a lifelong thing. I was fortunate enough to find my way out of that, but most people aren't. Most people are stuck in that cycle of addiction and incarceration, institutionalization. So yeah, I appreciate the work that we're doing to try to end youth incarceration, to decarcerate the state. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Norman. Thank you for your raw and painful sharing of what the juvenile system really is. Very appreciative. Now, please welcome Hawa Mohammed, who's going to share her work with restorative justice practices in diverse communities. And Hawa, thank you for being here.
Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. Sorry, I have a bit of a sore throat this today, but excuse me. I really wanted to just kind of say thank you to Norman because that was a great story and what a great um I just think that you have the personal experience and I learned so much about you every time you talk. So thank you, Norman, for just sharing more of your story. Um, my story is a little different, obviously. I personally didn't go into the criminal justice system. I personally wasn't inside the criminal justice system. I had a lot of family members and loved ones be involved with the criminal justice system, and that really radicalized me from a really young age. I think for me, being really aware as a Somali person, I kind of knew very early on how the world saw us and how some Mainers saw us, and I very quickly understood kind of the dehumanization of Black bodies specifically, and like the lack of grace and lack of forgiveness and care we have towards young Black boys. And I saw that personally when my own brothers had experiences with the criminal justice system. Um, it was very it's very traumatizing to see the lack of grace and care. And I knew right then and there when my own brother had been dealt, his own hand with the criminal justice system, that I wanted to be a part of that. And there was no way that I was going to let things like that continue. My cousin specifically, she had a lot of mental health issues, and instead of the state really trying to invest in doing things to solve it, they did the easiest route, which was just put them in the just lock them up, basically, right? Like that's the essentially the other route that we're very well aware of. So there are really just kind of very intense, like just emotional experiences that I hold in my mind that I always go back to, and I always that's my why, basically. For me as a Somali person, I think how we approach conflict and harm is very different from how it is in the American system. We have our own circle practice. We have the indigenous practices that we love to do, and I guess my role as a facilitator now is to bring some of those practices into the Western version of restorative justice. Right now, I work at Amjambo Africa. It's immigrant run newspaper. So we do a lot of immigrant based, community based work with immigrants, and a lot of that is community work. So my role is kind of blending news and community together. I also work as a restorative justice facilitator. That's the stuff that I do currently, and part of my work as Healing First, and is part of Justice Radio, and talking about these issues and interviewing people about their work in the criminal in the abolition work that they're doing. So I'm always excited to learn more and so excited to be here. So thank you all so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you do. Now I'd like to introduce Charlize Goodwin, who is the newest member, or one of the newest members of the York County Jail Board of Visitors. So happy to have her there. And she's going to share her journey through the youth system and into recovery. Charlize.
Hi guys, I'm Charlize. And Yeah, I've been sober now for 3.5 years, going on 4. I grew up in New Hampshire, and growing up, ever since I was little, I always saw my dad drinking, violence against my mom, watching the cops come in and, beating my dad up, and ultimately, just always left a bad taste in my mouth. Um, Granted, my dad was sick, obviously, because he was drinking a lot. So growing up, I just never had a good look on police officers. So much as so I got, something tattooed on me saying that, I hated them in a sense. So, and that's when I was like 11 years old. But growing up in New Hampshire, um, my family fell into addiction, started with my mom after she had left my father when I was 11. And when they had split up, my family was broken. So, hence, broken home, broken family, broken girl. Um, I ended up rebelling against everything. I didn't listen to anybody. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, fighting, drinking at a very young age, and then it slowly turned into using drugs with my mom at about 13. Um, and of course, growing up throughout all this, the cops were always coming into my home, um, and fighting with the cops, physical fighting, all the way up until I was 30 years old. Um, I didn't I didn't have an option at that age for anything. I didn't have an option for rehabilitation. I didn't have an option for, you know, life at all, to be guided in life, because the people that were supposed to guide me were using too. Um, my addiction went on from the age of 13 until just 3.5 years ago. Um, and I happened to come across the border of Maine and, get arrested. And they weren't letting me go. In New Hampshire, you can get arrested with possession and drugs, and oh, you pay a fine, pretty much. They don't have there's nothing there to help you. There's like no rehabs out there. There's a few and far in between now down in Manchester now, but back then there wasn't anything. But since being arrested in Maine, 3.5 years ago, I went to York County Jail. And it wasn't like all the times that I had been arrested in New Hampshire. When I was arrested in New Hampshire, I was just left alone in a cell on the ground. But York County Jail actually helped me. They actually gave me some options, and the option was Layman's Way. Layman's Way is no longer up and running now as of last year because of the new facility that they are trying to open up. Um, the people at Layman's Way actually cared about helping us addicts, and that was run by the a nonprofit program, the shelter program. So they weren't you know, they weren't concerned about money and how much they can make from each person coming in. And I think that's where things get lost, and there's a disconnect, because so many people want to make money and make money. It's a stigma in a sense. And then when you have somebody with addiction, usually 9 times out of 10, there's a co-occurring disorder, a mental health disorder. And as we all know, in the state of Maine, there is nothing with mental health to help people. For me, if I was younger, and I've said this since the day that I got actually sober and started getting recovery, is that if I was taught, or if there was something offered to me, like the NA program has with the 12 steps, to work on the healing part, the trauma part from, your parents and the things that went on in your household, and Even going into some schools these days and nowadays, you never know what child is hurting because we can hide it so well when we're a child. If we had the 12 steps program or something similar to it to offer to these kids, I think that's when we can stop it right there in the butt before it gets any further. And unfortunately for me, the stigma and me being limited to the things that I can do because of my criminal background. I have to wait to get things expunged and I have to be approved for that. Like I wanted to go into nursing and I may not be able to be accepted into programships because of my background. That's that's what hurts as like an adult and going through the things that I went through. There's a lot of things like that, but I've had to witness, friends of mine, overdose and die. My dad overdosed and died. My mom's still in active addiction. My sister's still in active addiction. So for me, it's a family problem. And I was pretty much raised and brought up into that. But layman's saved my life. So it hurts me to know that the people that work there are no longer helping save another life. Because I was going to go and work there, before they decided to shut it down because I wanted to give back. And I can't give back the way that I want to besides, doing what I'm doing now, but also being on the board and trying to come up with ideas maybe to help another incarcerated person or addicted person. But I think ultimately it's going to have to stem from a healing process. And when we're actively using we're in a mental, psychosis, we can't get to them. We can't tap into them without secluding them from something if they're an adult. But when it comes to the kids, I think it really should start with that, with the 12 steps.
Charlie,
I
you have
mean,
about a
maybe,
minute left.
yeah. And yeah, that's all I have to say. That went
Thank you.
quick.
And thank you for being on the board and for sharing your story. And yes, we are hopeful with the new center for those of us in York County, and I hope that you find a place there. Um, I'd like to introduce now our real host, Brianne Bear. Rita, do you want to talk to the audience for a
I'll
moment?
be so fast just for a moment. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being on here and staying on here and listening to everyone who has shared their story tonight, parts of their story. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be able to just sit here, hear your story, hold space for you. It hurts every time I hear a new one, but it continues to drive me at least. So it's important to share the painful parts. So I do want to just take a moment and encourage everyone to actually like sit with what you've heard tonight, feel it, let it go, and then focus on solutions because we obviously do this so that it can propel us forward. Feel free to always drop your thoughts in the chat, of course. Anything that you feel, Sarah kind of did a little disclaimer in the beginning, like this is hard stuff. Feel free to share stuff in the chat if you just want to get it off your chest, okay? So I want to just quickly talk about something that has already become a theme of tonight, and that is poverty, trauma, and needs going unmet. So Leslie, who will be speaking soon, had put this in as a little tidbit in our like script preparation. She said a lot of things happen because of trauma, poverty, and unmet needs. And so if a child isn't getting what they need at home, be it attention, connection, or a sense of feeling, a sense of belonging, excuse me, where do you think they go to look for it? So they go to school, right? Or they go to their friends, or they act out because they're missing something. And so they're trying to find it. And, to think about how they'll attain these things means that oftentimes they will do it in ways that aren't always correct, but they're children, they're babies, their brain's still developing until you're 20 something years old. And before we place blame on parents saying, well, if the parents paid more attention to them, I want you to think about something. And this is something I experienced, and probably any child any parent of a child on here experiences every day. We are all in survival mode. In today's day and age, we are all literally just trying to survive. There are very few households that can have one parent working and one parent at home any longer. And so parents are working multiple jobs. We're struggling to make ends meet. We're trying to navigate our own struggles. My children have two parents. All three of my children have two parents who struggle with addiction or are in recovery, or in some way we have that genetic tie. And so that's something that we all have to consider. Parents are struggling with their own stuff, and then we're still expected to be everything that our children need, and we're supposed to be on top of these devices that they're sneaking on and these things that they're doing with their friends. It is the hardest time ever probably in existence to be a parent in today's day and age. And so I want to, when we think about these things that happen with youth, just always consider you can't place blame, but finding solutions is really the truest and best way to progress, move forward. Placing blame is just not productive. And so always consider, we don't know people's households. We don't know what's going on inside of them. And we always need to be empathetic toward parents and children alike. And so that is just something I want to drop really fast. Next, we're going to have Cage Johnson, a very fierce advocate for restorative justice and many other things, but I'm going to let Cage start and mute myself. Go ahead, Cage.
Thanks, Bree. Yeah, happy to be here tonight and share the space with you all. I'm Cage. I come in with like a multi-part lens. I'm like a survivor of harm. I come from a family that's also been justice, systems impacted. I'm also a restorative and transformative justice facilitator and practitioner. So I do a lot of like facilitation work and just am overall like a diehard advocate for abolition and community care. So yeah, I have facilitated, cases through the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine. I did that for 3 years, actually with Hawa, who's on this call with us, and she worked there longer than me. And we worked with youth in our time there, and facilitated so many cases. I've also done some solo practice processes as well that have been like entirely like TJ process, like community based. And I guess I'll just add, I'm with Healing First. I'm a co-creator of Healing First, a collective led by survivors of harm, and we're advocating for RJ and TJ as options for everyone, like as accessible options for everybody, as a long-term goal for the state. And I'm also part of Merge, the Maine Restorative Justice Coalition. And yeah, when it comes to youth in particular, I mean, I like to remind us that we have like, there, I think it's some part under Title IX, but like there's an obligation to rehabilitate youth. And prisons, as we know, they're not rehabilitative, right? Like the youth that we've worked with who've been to Long Creek, like they often end up going back. And so part of what I thought might be helpful, I don't know how familiar people are with actual process, but I thought I would give like a really brief overview. If that sounds good. Leslie, do you want to add?
No, you can go, you can start off on it. Yeah.
I was just gonna like, yeah, go for it. Just to kind of give an idea of like, general circle practice. If people aren't familiar, there's typically like some kind of incident that happens, right? And then there's a referral made, typically to an RJ org. There's like, process of gaining consent and like doing intake. Consent is ongoing throughout an entire process for participants. It's a confidential process. People agree to that. A lot of the beginning of a process it's very one-to-one. It's very prep work heavy. Like we basically say as practitioners, like the bulk of a restorative justice process is going to be like one-to-one. It's going to be all of that pre-work, so that there aren't surprises when people are brought together for like a circle, that kind of thing. So you really get to know each other. You really like work to build that relationship and trust early on. You form community agreements together. You have a really like, full overview of process and make sure everything's understood. And you get to work through all the core questions of a process that you use in a circle, and you do that ahead of time with participants so that they're super, super prepped and ready for having any kind of dialogue together. And I'll just say, like, there's variations of process. Sometimes it's a circle where everyone comes together. Sometimes surrogates are used in some kinds of processes. Sometimes people choose to communicate through letters or something instead if coming in, being in person doesn't feel right. So no process looks exactly the same, but that's kind of the beauty of this. It's like it's determined by the people participating, what the process turns into and what it looks like. And then typically in that sort of circle phase where there is some kind of dialogue that takes place between participants, there's a repair agreement made, and that's something that's made collectively, collaboratively, right? Instead of like a courtroom being like, this is what must happen, this is the punishment, etc. It's what does repair look like? How can we make this as right as possible? And so being able to, really work through that collaboratively, come to an agreement, and close out that process and help follow that through with repair. And I don't know if you would add anything to that, Leslie, before I.
Yep, please let's bring in Leslie Ross, who also works with Cage. Please, Leslie.
No, I really thank you for inviting us, and it's a delight also to see so many of our colleagues here, but also some new faces, and just it's just really, yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I guess the only thing that I would add with the process element of it is that Cage spoke very much about like those preliminary meetings that we have with separate parties if we're talking about a harm repair, which is really about harm that has been caused to one person in particular. Of course, when we're working with youth, sometimes it's about repeat behaviors, so aggressive behavior in the school. So we'll get where there hasn't been really like a person, there hasn't been somebody assaulted, or there hasn't been somebody who's being burglarized, right? Where it is more often a self-inflicted harmful behavior that is that recurs. But the thing that also really happens in those preliminary meetings with everyone, like not just with youth, is like where you actually you're building a connection with them. You're building a better understanding of how it is that they are got into the positions that they are currently in, and what you come to realize is the degree to which, and thank you for referencing this earlier, to the degree to which they are have so many unmet needs. So you're often in this, I would say, almost like a quandary where like you're having to talk about how to repair a harm that was done, or how to go for like what could we do to like look at behaving differently, like what can we do to start like a process of like learning how some behavioral change. And then what you really find out is again like this long list of unmet needs, and how can you possibly have a conversation about repairing harm when you don't also address like those unmet needs? And this is where it ties in with schools. So yes, we get referrals from the Department of Corrections when there really has been a law broken of some kind. We have worked with a number of schools over the years, a little bit less this year, but we do get referrals from schools. Our hope is always that it happens in lieu of suspension or expulsion, but it almost always happens after a youth has been expelled or suspended. Then we're brought into some kind of process to have like a reentry process. And just what I've discovered, and just why I mention this is like where some of the problems come in, and this is very much like cultural about like who is excluded and who is like, we've worked with too many schools which make kind of every excuse in a way to not reintroduce a student who has behaviors that are difficult. So students who have mental health issues, students who are on IEPs. And so there is this constant struggle with trying to in holding processes and including principals and counselors and teachers to also offer there is a different way to do this. So, but at the same time, you kind of just have to hold, there's not much, when we do get a process, there's not much we can do to actually actively change the system that is like manufacturing the situations. So yeah, I mean that would be the only thing that I would add to around the processes. When it comes to the preliminary meetings, is it's just like really, and it's an opportunity to really have an insight into all the things that lead to that lead to disruptive behaviors.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was there something else like Cage and I kind of talked
That's
a little?
no, that's great. Thank you both so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
We all appreciate it. And I know that everyone here is hoping that it can expand through the state as you're hoping that it will with all the other diversion programs. Now,
I guess so one thing that I will add, and Cage and I had talked about this earlier. So yeah, I too am part of Merge and of Healing First. And we are working hard on trying to figure out how to get like education out there around like what RJ is, and also like working hard in first steps of like what would it mean to make restorative justice an actual option for anyone who is justice impacted. And that is whether it's like a person harmed or a victim, or whether that's the person whether that's the defendant. Like, can we get to a place where everyone is aware that this exists as an option? And we were part of a discussion earlier a couple of weeks ago where somebody said, like, let's not call it an alternative, right? Because an alternative kind of reinforces the status quo. It's not an alternative, it's an option. It's there and it's solid and it exists. And yeah, so just wanted to say, and not just for youth, but for adults as well.
thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to bring on Gordon Perry. Gordon is a force of nature. Gordon is a dedicated advocate for change. He works with the Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition. He works with Parole for Maine, with Society Impact, with the No Penobscot County Jail Expansion Group. He works for and with many others trying to make a change to this system. And he's going to share his story with us now. Gordon.
Thank you, Sarah. That's going to be hard to live up to. Thanks for that introduction. And thank everybody for coming tonight. Good to see everybody here. Sorry my camera can't be on, but my internet is the running joke of all my meetings. Very unstable. So anyway, this is really important to me because I feel like we're at the pinnacle of where all this system related never-ending systemic issues run from, and it's the kids. I got into the system when I was probably about 12 years old. Had the typical split up family thing there, just the dad or just the mom or back and forth, the whole that whole thing there. Started doing the running away thing when I was about 12 years old, I'd say, and that got me into the system. And back then, I've been in the system now too. Another thing I should say, because I'm still currently incarcerated at Maine State Prison, but I've been in the system for over 30 years. So it started off when I was, like I said, about 12 years old. And I'd probably say from that time on, I'd be lucky if I got 2 years out of the system in total. So I know that's pretty crazy. But yeah, that's a reality of it. And back then it was even, sorry about that. Back then it was a lot different than it is now. Like, I'm hearing these stories about restorative justice and diversion, and I love this stuff because back in the day there was none of that. There was that you literally, I can remember as a kid going to probably 7 or 8 different juvenile places that were just a place to house you and dump you and forget about you, and that didn't help anybody. I mean, if anything, that it definitely made you worse. And people are trying these days. I mean, I never thought for sure I would be inside the a community classroom right now talking about the system and how we can try to fix it and so forth. listen to some of the people talk here tonight, like Norman, Charlize, Cage, hearing their stories, and especially some of the work they're doing. Like, one of my biggest things, and probably the people that know me know this is going to come up when I have a conversation, is like the people in the system. They know the system better than anybody. So if you want to try to fix it, you should be trying to use these people to do so. And a lot of the long timers in the system want to help. And I've been trying forever now to get a mentor program going that we can do that. And I don't care if it's with the juveniles, that'd be awesome and amazing. And we're on the doorsteps of doing that even maybe, but I don't want to jinx it. But even with people on the street, it could be with people that are in restorative justice circles or in rehabs. I mean, the people in here know, we've been through everything. There's nothing that we can't, have some solid advice for. And when people talk to people that are actually in the system.
Yeah, Gordon, as always, we're starting to lose your audio. So we may circle back to you. We just want to say thank you, and we wish that you had the restorative justice programs. Let's for a moment, and maybe we'll come back to Gordon, but let's bring back Jay to be our last personal speaker before we hear about the diversion program. I would like to just make sure that everybody knows that Jay has played a critical role in planning and implementing this forum. Along with sharing the story, we thank you, Jay, for your commitment to changing the system, to helping us get this program together. And why don't you have some final words before we bring on Ben to talk about the diversion program?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everyone who just spoke. Thank you to Bree. Thank you to Cage. Thank you to Hawa. Thank you to Leslie, Frank, Norman, and Charlize. I am deeply touched. Often had to turn my camera off to cry a little because it's very personal in this moment. And to close off, I want to do a couple little reminders about things. One is that in the 1950s, in the peak of mental health asylums, there were 500,000 people in asylums. In the 1970s, when deinstitutionalization of asylums started, was also when the war on drugs picked up. When the war on drugs picked up, post-war on drugs, we have 880,000 people with mental health disorders who are incarcerated. And that's who are known mental health disorders before and prior to incarceration. So we never got rid of asylums. We never deinstitutionalized. We transferred to an even more violent asylum called the prison industrial complex. And then within that, I want to talk about, I want to recognize Patricia Hill Collins' understanding of interlocking systems of oppression. And I want to tie that into a professor of mine, Dr. Phyllis Jackson's understanding of interlocking systems of power and control. So interlocking systems of oppression kind of comes alongside that Kimberly Crenshaw and Gwendolyn Brooks' understanding of intersectionality. So race, gender, class, ability, those kinds of those various things, mental health, as we've talked about multiple times in this conversation. Each of those things are part of the systems of oppression. They're tools of the system of oppression. The systems of power and control recognize who puts those systems of oppression together. So white nationalism creates racism. Patriarchy creates sexism. So it puts, when we think of power and control, we look at how are these systems, these identities created as tools for controlling people and implementing dominance. And then I want to take us from that idea into an idea that a lot of people who know me hear me talk about all the time, which is the interlocking systems of genocide, colonization, and enslavement. These three systems empower together collectively the systems of oppression and the systems of power and control. Colonization steals children for enslavement. We've seen that on the history of Turtle Island. We see that on the history of the continent of Africa. And we see that enslavement and stealing of children practice happening today when children are placed in carceral settings. Um, and that is all a part of a cycle that empowers genocide and empowers land theft and empowers continual enslavement to empower capitalism. So, those are just some concepts I want to bring into our understanding as we digest all of this incredible information from personal experience to practices for resolution. Um, and Another thing I want to talk about, I want to bring in was a quote from Leslie, which is, how can you talk about repairing harm without talking about unmet needs? So when we think about all of these systems and we think about all of the people who have worked to create understandings around these systems, like Angela Davis, like the Combahee River Collective, how do we use these tools that we are being handed from thousands of years of practice of transformative justice and restorative justice, and how do we bring those into today to deconstruct, or not just deconstruct, but to construct the world that we actually want, a world outside of the interlocking systems of genocide, colonization, and enslavement.
Thank you, Jay. That is a lot to process, and I hope we spend some time doing that. Moving in that direction, though, our final speaker tonight is going to give us some of that hope and some of that, how do we change these systems? And please welcome Ben Miller of Society Impact, who is going to share with us diversion programs. What are they? How are they going to work? And how are they better? Ben.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, sir. Hi, I'm Ben. I work at Society Impact with Frank Zaro and also Gordon Perry. And basically, we help with state and like city and county and local governments with issues with programs uh, related to diversion and reentry and public defense and other criminal legal efforts. And I want to take a minute to explain um, our youth diversion model, which we submitted as an RFP in Region 3 of Maine, which includes Penobscot County, as well as other counties in the area. And the basic idea of it is pretty simple. When a young person gets in trouble, the first response should not be always to pull them into the juvenile legal system. Diversion gives us other options. Instead of moving straight towards court, detention, or a formal record, we can look at what happened, what may be going on in this young person's life, and what kind of response is most likely to keep it from happening again. One of the most important parts of our model of diversion is that it's unlike a lot of other so-called diversion programs around the country. We consider it true diversion because one of its main goals is to keep minors out of the traditional criminal court calendar, so that it's not like you get a conviction and then but you don't get sent to jail. You just have to go through a program or something, but then you still have a criminal record, which comes with all the handicaps and disabilities that come with you know with simply having a record, not even having been incarcerated. But yeah, but yeah, and we believe that this gives us the best chance at resolving the matters, the core issues that cause people to offend in the first place. It's data shows that diversion is much more effective at reducing crime than incarceration. It's much more financially beneficial to communities. And it's also just obviously more humane. Um, and so we think, the earlier the intervention, the better, both in a person's life and in the process of them going through the legal system. We think getting people out of the legal system and connected with the resources that they need as soon as possible is the best way to go about it. And I mean, this is especially important for, like the Penobscot County area, because it's often hard for people. This area, as a kind of rural, as a more rural part of the country, often has pretty scarce resources, or it's often not easy for people to access resources and services they need, and it can create for impoverished or minority communities, or especially strenuous conditions that are which is is where most offenses is the core, is the root cause of most people's most of is I'm sorry, I'm really bad at public speaking, but it's yeah, people's material conditions are 9 times out of 10 what cause them to offend, and so it's especially important for rural communities to have access to programs like these.
Thank you, Ben. You're a fantastic speaker, and all the work that you've put into the diversion programs is invaluable. We have up here now a list of resources if people would like to get some more information for themselves. We are now going to stop the recording. We've invited everyone, speakers included, anyone that has to leave, we understand. But people are going to stay for questions and answers. I'm going to stop the recording now, so that part will be private. We'd like to thank you all. I just like to make a personal note once again. Society Impact and Brianne Bear, we would not be here tonight without them, and Jay, but Brianne, Bree puts this whole thing together without anyone ever knowing what she's doing, how she's doing it, and yet we all come together and here we are. So thank you, Bree, and thank you, Frank and Ben, Society Impact, and Gordon, behind the scenes for everything. So sort of a weird internet problem, but we always know you're back there working. So thank you all, and stop the recording and open it up for questions.